Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you for attending this webinar this morning on outdoor architectural lighting. We have just under 30 minutes, so I hope that over the next 30 minutes I can start to introduce you, inspire you a little bit as well. What we're going to look at today are the top 6 items to consider when beginning your design in architectural lighting, but also we'll start to look at the top 5 methods of how we apply light to an architectural facade. There are more methods, but I think in terms of time, I'm going to keep it to the 5 basic methods for the time being, and we'll crack on from there. So let's start with these top 6 considerations. So the way that we look at it from a Zumtobel Group and acdc point of view, first of all, it's context. Second, it's color. 3 is contrast. 4 is control. 5 is quality. And 6 is people. So let's start to look at those individually. First of all, let's look at context. My main point here when we're thinking about context is when you're starting on a project, when you're looking at a project, always really understands, this might sound strange, but where is your project? What is to the left? What's to the right? What's above? What's below? You know, you should really get an understanding of the view. Where can this building or series of buildings be seen from? And it's about that balance. It's about looking at the foreground and it's looking at the background. So if we take this really simple sketch here, you can start to see there's a modern building on the left, a historic building on the right, and there are many things in between. There may be sculpture, trees, landscape, steps. And really for me, this is all about looking at what's around. So when we're focusing on a new project, whether it's a single facade or more, really gain an understanding of what's going on in the foreground and the background. Because when we start to look at that, we can start to think about how much light or how little light is really needed to make the impact that we're looking to achieve. My point here really is that there are a lot of variables and we need to consider that. What we're trying to do, of course, in terms of providing architectural lighting is give an identity, whether it's to a single building, whether it's to a whole town as part of a master plan. We want to give it an identity. We want to give it its personality. We're shaping it, we're giving it a personality, but also we need to think about safety. You know, we're putting people at ease and we're wanting them to stay and maybe even spend a little bit of money in that space. When we think about where this building or series of buildings is or are, you know, if it's in an urban environment, maybe as someone comes around a corner, they're discovering what this building looks like in the hours of darkness. We're bringing attention to it. So whether it's historic or whether it's a modern building, you know, it's about creating an experience. There should be a level of amazing people. That doesn't necessarily mean theatrical lighting, but really bringing a building to life in the hours of darkness. When we move on to number 2 and we think about color, we also need to think about texture. And by that, I mean the type of material that we're using. So when we think about color, do we want single color, a warm white integrated into the building, or is it about color change? You know, is it single color, again, in blue or red or whatever you may be, and maybe it's a commercial color? Or is it color change over a period of time? It may only have 6 scenes over the period of a year, and it just slowly goes from one scene to another. But as I say, we need to think about the materials. You know, is it a glazed building, a historic red brick, Corten steel, or is it dark brick? The way we apply light, it's really important that we think about the material that we're working with. So it's really important that we play with light, that we pick up a fitting and we point it at that material and we understand how that material is going to respond to the light, but also the color of the light. So 3 is contrast. So on a project, are you looking for more uniform lit effect? So when you look at the image on the right-hand side, is it uniform? Is it the middle one, which is a linear and it's grazing up? Or is it on the left-hand side where there's maybe more lower output luminaires and they're grazing up each floor of that building? So think about the contrast. So next I want to focus on control. So here, think about, is it simply on and off? You know, that's quite often in architectural lighting, and that's absolutely fine. It may also be you just want to dim it down by 5 or 10% just to take the edge off and create that balance of the intensity of the light. If it is color change, and maybe you're using glass and you're backlighting glass, you may then want to think about a more sophisticated level of control. And is that centrally controlled? Where is that control unit going to be held? So the two short videos I'm going to show you now are two very different ways of doing it. One is color and the other is single color. And you really start to create that balance in terms of the contrast of the light used. Oh, sorry. Oh, press the button. There we go. So you can start to see here on the left-hand side, we've got color change. And this is a community building, it's a central building. On the right-hand side, this is about using 7 or 8 fittings, and that's all. It's about just creating an incredible historic centerpiece to a town and really creating a great deal of contrast with using a low amount of luminaires in this context. So due to time, I'll move on for now. So then we move on to number 5, which is quality. This is thinking about the product, think about the beam, think about the color consistency of one beam with the next, one product next to another product, making sure that there's a color consistency in terms of the LEDs that are used, the quality of that lit effect. Making sure that wherever these products are going to be used, make sure they're suitable for that environment. So whether it's -20 to +50, make sure that product is suitable for its location. Think about the seasons, think about the environment that it's going in. Are there going to be a sandstorm? Is it seasons where there's leaves and there's dust that may clog up any accessories that are applied to the front of a luminaire? Think about how accessories can be integrated into a product so that you're getting that strong lit effect, but dirt and dust and leaves aren't clogging up and having an impact upon the lit effect. Think about the location of the fitting. Does it need to be drive over? Does it need to be walk over? And of course, when we think about quality and we think about optics, we need to think about light pollution. We need to make sure that we're using the right optic, that we're focusing the lights upon the building, and we're using the right optic to do that, that we're not pouring light into the night sky. So, so important. So the 6th element is people. And this is not the least important. If anything, it is the most. We're doing this for people. We're lighting these buildings in a way that we're encouraging people to use, to live, and to be proud of the city, the town that they live in the hours of darkness. We want people to come out and enjoy this space in the hours of darkness. But people is also about thinking about where our product's positioned. Think about the people inside and what's their view externally. Whether that's a building whereby by lighting the landscape outside, you're extending that view in the winter time in the hours of darkness, but also think about the location of those luminaires so they're not bringing glare to those people that are indoors or outdoors. So it's about the control of the light. It's about the control of the lit effect so that people can enjoy it, will enjoy it, and spend more time outside enjoying that environment. So how do we come to these conclusions? How do we get to that point? So here I put together a selection of images that really starts to show the different ways of how we can do this. The top left there, you can see a simple sketch, and I'll come on to that in a moment. In the middle, there's a short video, and hopefully you'll start to see this is a simple mock-up that was done on a 70-meter tall building. And you can start to see how those layers of light slowly come on to bring that building to life. And it's about those layers. You have a linear fitting or a series of linear fittings grazing up the lower level. Then you have narrow beam fittings picking out each of those architectural elements. And a mock-up can really help you understand the layout or the distances, the offset distances of a building. Now, I fully appreciate that not all buildings are built, and sometimes we've got to model them, and we're not able to do a mock-up. And so the images at the bottom of this page really start to show, sometimes it's as simple as doing a cardboard mock-up and integrating products into them just to see what the performance of the lit effect will be. It might be that you look to do some sketches. My point really on this slide is that, gain a level of confidence about light and about how to use lights and how we communicate our ideas. Here, this is just very simply some sketches that were put together for a series of building concepts. And it's about getting that message across. Another way is of course, modeling. How do we get that message across in terms of that lit effect? So this is a church that we've worked on in the UK, and you can start to see the model that was already available, that was able to be downloaded. And earlier when I talked about views and the context, this church is really, really important in terms of being able to see it from 8 to 10 miles away. So the top third of this building is really important as to how we pick it out, but also gaining those light levels. So here you'll start to see layers of light building up. So we can start to use that modeling to pick up and light up this building. And we can start to see about how we're using different optics to light this building and really bring it to life. Let me just go through that again. So we're lighting from the sides. If you want more information, please just shout and we can go through it another day. There are 10-degree beams at the top, 16-degree beams in the middle, 30-degree beams at the lower level. And it's about using, on this project, existing positions to light this church. Now, as I said earlier, a mock-up is really, really important if you're able to do it. And this is a great example where we took half of the facades and lit that as part of a mock-up. Okay, so the great thing about this for us was we were doing this 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I've never received a level of feedback on a mock-up before. We had local people coming out of their houses and really looking at this church and seeing it in a very different way. And they were complimenting the lit effect on the church, on bringing out the detail, the texture that they hadn't seen before. So it's very, very rewarding. So how can we apply light? For us and for this webinar, we'll focus on 5 methods: building mount, recessed, ground mount, integrated light, and integrated and backlighting. So what I really want to emphasize is that this is not a prescriptive, you must do this and you must do that. This is really about how do we build up those layers? How do we make sure that this building or series of buildings come to life by using different layers of light? First of all, let's focus on building mount. This is an incredible project that is done or was recently completed, was designed by LDI in London, Oxford Street in London. So we're talking retail, we're talking money, we're talking about bringing people into this space at nighttime. We're raising their eye line by lighting the vertical. We're really bringing out each and every floor by grazing light up. And it's really about bringing out the color, the texture, the height, the scale of these buildings, the character of these buildings. So when we move on to this next slide, we can start to look at how it was starting to be achieved. So we've got a narrow beam, low output plaza fitting, grazing up each of the pillars. And then we've got a pheno providing a low, soft wash of light in certain areas. And remember that as we go higher on a building, we often need less light. So at the highest level, it's just an individual single LED surface mount spotlight grazing up and picking out that architectural detail. So whereas maybe that was warm white and cool white, the other end of the spectrum is of course color. This is the Holiday Inn in Singapore, where very simply a single fitting installed at each level, at each window, is grazing up that architectural facades. Multiple fittings, obviously, but available or have been programmed so that they're blue and green, which is really all about their corporate colors. So you can start to see here how the blade fitting was integrated into that facade, grazing up in that blue finish. So as I said earlier, we need to think about those layers and how we build them up. So let's look at building mount and recessed. So King's Cross London, incredible award-winning project. ACDC were involved with lighting the historical main facades of this project by Studio Fractal. So here you can start to see how linear recessed and linear surface mounts are integrated into this building facade. So you've got linear fittings end to end, providing a continuous linear effect, grazing up that architectural facade. And then you have the recessed luminaire at low level, also grazing up. And this is about framing the building, making sure that from the base all the way to the top, we're lighting that building and working with the architecture. But we've got to remember, this is a transport hub. This is about people. This is about how and where people interact. They're meeting people, they're waiting for people in this environment, they're on a journey. So we need to think about glare, we need to think about control of the lights as well. So deep LED recessed position, using a louver, so you're getting that lit effect, but we're controlling the light. So now let's start to look at ground mount. So here, don't think about this as just about high uniform lit effect. It can be about high contrast in the mock-up images that I showed earlier. So think about your contrast levels. What are you trying to achieve? So here, this is the Leeds Broadcasting Tower, 70-meter tower. So here, this is about ensuring that we're lighting the architecture, we're accentuating those architectural details, we're accentuating the color, but also the texture of that Corten steel. But we're also making sure we're using the right optic and we're not pouring light into the night sky. So this is a project that we worked on last summer. This is a 12th century castle in Croatia, an incredible, beautiful location. It sits within an incredible area of landscape, and within this town, they have a huge street festival once a year. And that was primarily what the lighting, the external architectural lighting was brought in to achieve. To give you an idea, during this festival, there's an image here, top right, of 2,000 or 3,000 people at the concerts as part of this festival. This castle was lit by pole-mounted luminaires that were mounted 30 meters away. Those lighting the floor, the bushes, the trees, the sky, the castle, everywhere. And what we really wanted to do was bring the lighting up close, bring out a little bit of texture, a warmth, and really accentuate this castle from the main viewing points. Previous trials, not by us, had been very orientated around color, hadn't really brought this building to life. So previously I talked about the importance of a mock-up. The great thing about a mock-up is you can get people on site there with you, the important people, the stakeholders as part of this project. So whether it's the director of tourism from the local town, whether it's the local mayor, whether it's a local committee, people from the castle, we got those people there on one single night so that we could talk about the light, how it can be used, how it can be controlled, and all of those type of things. But as well as that, you're going to get some surprises. And for me, we did on this project. So you can see here, this is the mock-up that we did on a portion of the facade. And on the evening, we were advised, actually, this is beautiful. We love this, but we need color. Oh, okay, we need color. So anyone that doesn't like color on 12th century castles, look away now. But the important thing about this is that we brought color to this because from the castle's perspective, they have a lot of corporate functions about bringing money into the town. So huge corporate companies coming, having corporate dinners, having festivals around in the grounds of the castle. They want that castle to be lit in their color. So here you can start to see we're still bringing out the texture, the form of the castle, using contrast and using those elements for this castle, but we're bringing in the color as well. So they can tune it to what they want. So what we do have to consider is the bridge is viewable from 360 degrees, but there are certain views that are more important than others. So the way that we overcame this, and you know, when we think about budgets, we've got to think about budgets. We looked at these elements that you can see here as the A-grade surfaces, and then round the back where the views are limited, but it's still important, and where the castle wasn't previously lit. This is where we looked to offset the luminaires, and then what we did was we looked to provide a more uniform lit effect upon the facades. So you're still getting the color, you're still getting that impact, but we're not using as many fittings, and we're still ensuring that we're not pouring light into the night sky. So then we need to think about other forms of light. So those other three are about projecting lights onto a architectural facades. Let's now think about how we might integrate products into the project, into the facades. And one of the key elements here that I would always encourage is getting involved early. Getting involved early, maybe it's a new build or a new element to a facade. Get involved with the architects, with the lighting designer, with that interdisciplinary team, so that you get that real clear understanding as to how to integrate lighting. So here, this is about framing the height, the scale of this building. This is about color. It's about a linear lit effect grazing up the whole of this tower. It's an incredible building. So really simple linear lit effect integrated into the perimeter of the building, and then also the light boxes down the front that are above the residential, hotel and office spaces. So you can have that cascade and dynamic lit effect pouring down this building. Also, we may want to think, when we think about delineation, is bringing people from the outside in. So the image on the right-hand side, think about how those linear lines of light can be incorporated onto the vertical, but also in the horizontal. Let's take them from outside, bring them all the way in to the building as well. Or maybe it's really simple, like the image on the left, simple lines of light framing and shaping that building. So now let's think about backlighting facades. So what I would really encourage here is to get an understanding of the material that you're using. Get hold of a luminaire, get hold of the sample of the glass or whatever the material is, and really gain an understanding of how does the light perform. This is an incredible project recently completed by BDP. So it's taking an old town hall and bringing it into a real hospitality space. So respecting the historical facade and bringing in this backlit wall representing the cinema. This is a new public realm space. You've got restaurants, cafes, you've got a new open public realm space. And this vertical, this facade is really providing that incredible backdrop to this whole new environment. And here you can see how the blade was integrated at each level, grazing down and grazing up. So to really provide an incredible wow factor to this facade. And similar here, I showed earlier this project as a video. This is a backlit facade with glass. It's a Stadthammer, it's a community building. And you can start to see from the buildings around, this was a centerpiece to the community. You know, when we think about people, when we think about how people interact with their local environments, you know, this is the color makes it stand out, and it's quite subtle. It's integrated. It's integrated with the surroundings. You've got the color grazing down. And you can start to see here by this really simple sketch where you've got a 200 mil void. The height of the facade is about 7.7 meters, and the blade is focused not on the glass, but on the vertical behind. So it's the interreflected light that you're getting backlighting that frosted glass. And then at the bottom, you can see just a little bit of kick. And what you've got there is you have a mirror lit effect on the base, kicking light up, just to frame it, just to really get that beauty and that color. So to conclude this this webinar for today, so for us as acdc and the Zumtobel Group, outdoor architectural lighting is not all about light levels. So if it's not about light levels, what is it about? For us, it's about the creative application of light to an external facade and its surrounding space, to create interest, to provide a point of destination, to give a location an identity. It's about the seamless integration of luminaires into a building so that during the day they are not seen, but by night they bring a facade and an external space to life. So before you leave, and we'll have a question session for everyone as well, I just wanted to bring you, we've got to do the corporate thing. So we have a new magazine that's been released over the last, I think it was a week ago now, which is called ID. This is an online magazine, which you are more than welcome to come and ask us for, and we can send it on to you. And really it follows on from this webinar. It really talks about, it gives some tips and tricks about how to design for backlighting facades. It gives some great examples, some great case studies of projects that have been completed, and it gives a little bit more detail on how they were completed, and some excerpts and interviews with clients. More up and coming webinars that we've got We've got the Cove lighting webinar that's coming up on the 7th of December, where really this is about how and why and where with the Cove light and typical architectural details. And then in January, we'll send you out an invite for bridges and monuments.